Everything begins in the mind. Every breakthrough, every shift, every transformation you've ever witnessed in anyone's life started with a decision, an internal choice to no longer accept the old story. When you wake up each day and choose to condition your mind, you're not just listening to words. You're reshaping the blueprint of who you are and what you believe you're capable of. Most people spend their entire lives reacting, letting their circumstances dictate their mood, their energy, their actions. But the moment you decide to take control of your inner world, everything in your outer world begins to rearrange itself. You stop being a prisoner of your past patterns and start becoming the architect of your future. When you listen to something that elevates you every day, you're doing more than just feeding your mind. You're training it. You're rewiring the automatic thoughts that tell you you're not enough, or it's too late, or you should settle for what's unrealistic. You're replacing them with beliefs that have power behind them. Beliefs that make you move differently, breathe differently, show up differently. And that's where everything changes. Because you don't get in life what you want. You get what you're conditioned for. You get what your nervous system is trained to expect. Manist. So if you want a life that's bigger, richer, more aligned with your purpose, you've got to train your mind every single day to expect more, to demand more, to believe in more. There's a moment in every person's life where the old identity starts to conflict with the new vision. You can feel it. You can feel it. You wake up one day and realize that the thoughts you've been thinking are too small for the life you want to live. The habits you've been repeating are too limited for the future you're trying to create. You're trying to create? In deep down, you know you're meant for more. But that amore requires a shift. A mental breakthrough that doesn't happen once, but happens repeatedly. Consistently until it becomes who you are. That's what listening to this every day does for you. It chips away at the old patterns and strengthens the new ones. It takes you from I hope to I decide. From a maybe one day today is the day. Your mind is like a garden. If you don't plant something intentional, weeds will grow by default. Doubt, fear, hesitation, the old stories you've been repeating for years. Daily conditioning is how you plant something powerful. It's how you take a thought like, I can't, and turn it into watch me. It's how you take the old labels you've carried. Labels from your past. Labels from your failures. Labels from people who couldn't see your potential. And you replace them with the identity of someone who creates, someone who leads, someone who grows. You're not just listening to motivation. You're aligning your internal world with the person you've always known you were meant to be. Every time you choose to feed your mind something empowering, you're interrupting the cycle that's held you back. You're weakening the neural pathways that keep you stuck. You're creating space for a new story, a new belief, a new level of emotional strength. And when you do that again and again, day after day, you eventually reach a point where the old version of you simply can't survive anymore. It doesn't fit. It doesn't match the identity you've spent each morning reinforcing. That's when you start making decisions from strength instead of fear. That's when you stop waiting for opportunities and begin creating them. That's when life transforms. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Think about the moments in your life when you felt unstoppable. You felt that way because your mind was aligned with your purpose. There was no conflict between what you wanted and what you believed you could achieve. Daily conditioning brings you back into that state again and again. It reminds you of your power. It reminds you that the limitations you've believed in were only habits of thought, not truths. It reminds you that the quality of your life is shaped by the quality of what you repeat internally. When you repeat empowerment, you become empowered. When you repeat possibility, you become unstoppable. You become unstoppable. When you repeat purpose, you start living a life that reflects it. Every day you listen, something inside you grows stronger. A voice, a belief, an inner certainty that says, I'm not here to live small. It becomes louder than the voice of fear. It becomes louder than the voice of doubt. And eventually, it becomes the dominant force of your life. That's what creates breakthroughs. That's what changes patterns. That's what transforms a person from someone who hopes things get better into someone who makes things better. This is the power of repetition. This is the power of training your mind intentionally instead of letting life train it for you. When you decide to do this every day, you're sending a message to yourself that you're done with the old standards. You're done living below your potential. You're done settling. on. And when your mind receives that message day after day, it starts aligning your emotions, your energy, your actions, your decisions, all toward a higher direction. Because the truth is, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you rise to the level of your identity. And identity is built through repetition, through emotion, through conditioning. When you listen to something that elevates you every single day, you're not just changing what you think, you're changing who you become. You're stepping into a version of yourself that doesn't sit back, that doesn't hesitate, that doesn't doubt. A version of yourself that leads, that grows, that creates, that becomes. And if you keep doing it, if you keep feeding your mind with strength, courage, clarity, and purpose, you will wake up one day and realize you've outgrown the life you used to settle for. You'll realize your thoughts have changed, your emotions have changed, your habits have changed, and your results have transformed because you had the courage to condition your mind daily for the life you were truly meant to live. And that is the moment everything changes. You said, expand key point 3 into a 950-word segment. Flowing your environment is shaping you even in the moments when you think you're unaffected by it. Every conversation you engage in, every habit you repeat, every piece of content you consume, every room you enter, all of it is influencing who you become. Most people believe their environment is something they simply have to tolerate or endure. But the truth is, your environment is either pulling you forward or pulling you backward. It's never neutral. And the moment you become aware of this, the moment you recognize how much power it has over your energy, your identity, and your future, you begin to take back control. You've probably had moments where you felt unstoppable, clear, strong, inspired, and then you walked into the wrong environment and felt your energy collapse. You talked to someone who drained your hope. You stepped back into a routine that suffocated your momentum. You scrolled through things that pulled you away from what you were building. And suddenly you weren't acting from your highest self anymore. You were acting from the old patterns your environment activated. That's how powerful environment is. It can either reinforce your greatness or reinforce your limitations. But when you make the intentional decision to redesign your environment, you start shaping a space, internally and externally, that supports your potential, not your past. You begin elevating the standards of what you allow around you. You start choosing who you spend time with based on values, energy, and alignment, rather than convenience or comfort. You start fueling your mind with ideas that challenge you, that stretch you, that demand more of you. And just like that, your environment becomes a tool for transformation, rather than a trap that keeps you repeating the same struggles. Every day you listen to something empowering, you are actively rewiring your internal environment. Or you're feeding your mind thoughts that elevate your identity instead of shrinking it. You're conditioning yourself to think at a higher level, even if the world around you hasn't caught up yet. This is powerful because your internal environment is the one environment you bring everywhere you go. If that environment is filled with strength, clarity, passion, vision, nothing outside of you can pull you back down for long. But let's be honest, creating an environment of greatness doesn't always feel easy. Sometimes it means outgrowing people you once loved. Sometimes it means releasing relationships that pull you into old cycles. Sometimes it means stepping away from conversations that once felt familiar, but now feel like a weight around your ankle. Growth often asks you to rise above what you've been surrounded by, not because you're better than anyone else, but because you're committed to becoming the version of yourself you know you're meant to be. There's a moment in everyone's journey when their vision becomes bigger than their environment. Listen, and when that moment comes, you have two choices. Shrink your vision to match your surroundings, or elevate your surroundings to match your vision. Most people choose the first because it's easier. It's safer. It requires less discomfort. But the ones who choose the second, the ones who intentionally build a world around themselves that reinforces their potential, those are the people who experience transformation that others can't even comprehend. Your environment should remind you of your goals. It should pull you into action, not tempt you into distraction. The people around you should challenge your excuses, not validate them. The routines you follow each day should keep you aligned with your highest values, not your old habits. Or not your old habit. Everything you allow into your world should support the life you're trying to create, because if it doesn't, it's quietly working against you. And the beautiful part is, you don't have to overhaul everything at once. Sometimes the smallest changes in your environment create the biggest shifts in your life. Start by surrounding yourself with voices that lift you, messages that ignite you, energy that strengthens you. Listen to things every day that remind you who you want to become. Come. Put yourself in environments, mentally and physically, that make mediocrity feel uncomfortable and growth feel natural. When you do this consistently, your standards change automatically. You no longer feel at home in places that diminish your potential. Even your physical space matters. The room you wake up in, the place you work in, the daily atmosphere you operate from. These things influence your unconscious mind more than you realize. Clean up the space. Add reminders of your goals. Remove the distractions that steal your focus. Create a space that signals to your brain, this is where I rise. This is where I build. This is where I expand. And remember, your environment isn't just a place. It's a frequency. It's an energy you surround yourself with. It's the emotional climate you expose yourself to daily. When you make the choice each day to step into an environment of positivity, growth, challenge, and purpose, you start to operate from a higher internal state. You begin making decisions from strength rather than fear. You start seeing opportunities where you once saw obstacles. You become more resilient, more creative, more decisive. Eventually, something incredible happens. Your environment stops shaping you, and you start shaping your environment. People feel different around you because your energy has shifted. Conversations change because your standards have changed. Your presence elevates the room rather than the room shrinking your presence. That's what happens when you commit to daily conditioning. That's what happens when you surround yourself with the influences that match the future you're building. And when you reach that point, when your inner environment is so strong, so aligned, so elevated that nothing around you can pull you back into who you used to be, you become unstoppable. You become intentional. You become the creator of your life instead of the product of your surroundings. And that is when your entire world begins to rise with you, ChatGPT said. There's a moment in life when you realize that the person you've been is not the person you're destined to remain. And you feel that pull, that internal nudge, that quiet whisper telling you there's a higher version of yourself waiting to be lived. And the truth is, that version isn't unlocked by a single breakthrough, a single decision, or a single moment of inspiration. It's unlocked by the choices you make every single day, the small ones, the consistent ones, the ones nobody sees. The ones that stack layer by layer until they shape a completely different identity. Because transformation isn't an event, it's a commitment. It's a daily devotion to becoming someone who refuses to trade long-term greatness for short-term comfort. It's choosing growth when fear begs you to shrink. It's choosing courage when excuses offer you an easy escape. It's choosing discipline when your emotions try to negotiate with you. Every day, you're either reinforcing the identity of your past or strengthening the identity of your future. And the version you feed the most is the version that wins. Listening to something empowering every day is about more than motivation. It's about reminding yourself of who you're becoming. It's about waking up and choosing to align your actions with your purpose instead of your patterns. When you hear a message that elevates you daily, you're not just consuming information. You're conditioning your identity. You're telling your mind, this is who I am. This is what I expect from myself. This is the direction I'm moving. And that repetition begins to carve a new emotional pathway inside you. A pathway that leads to strength. A pathway that leads to clarity. A pathway that leads to a life you're proud to live. Most people underestimate how powerful identity is. They think change comes from willpower, but willpower fades. They think it comes from motivation, but motivation rises and falls. Identity, though, identity lasts. You behave according to who you believe you are. If you believe you're someone who always falls short, your actions will fit that belief. If you believe you're someone who's capable, powerful, resilient, unstoppable, you will act in alignment with that story. That's why committing daily to your higher self matters so much. You're rewriting the story of who you are. You're stepping into a new identity one day at a time. The highest version of you is already inside you, waiting for you to choose it more often. Waiting for you to say yes to it daily. Not once a month when you feel inspired. Not once a year when you set resolutions. Every day, even on days when you feel tired. Even on days when doubt creeps in. Even on days when life gets messy. Especially on those days. Because commitment isn't proven in comfort, It's proven in challenge. It's demonstrated when everything in you wants to go back to old habits, and you say, "Oh no, this time I rise." But that's what separates people who transform their lives from people who only talk about transforming. One group waits for the right moment, the perfect situation, the perfect feeling. The other group creates their moment through daily commitment. They make the decision that their growth is non-negotiable. They train their mind every morning to focus on their purpose. They take action even when no one is watching. They hold themselves to a higher standard even when no one else knows. And with every decision, they strengthen the identity of someone who's destined for more. And the beautiful thing is, the more you commit daily, the easier it becomes. What once felt difficult starts to feel natural. What once felt like discipline starts to feel like identity. You begin waking up differently, not because life magically became easier, but because you became stronger. You begin speaking to yourself differently, not with doubt, but with certainty. You begin showing up differently, not as someone hoping for change, but as someone creating it. As this new identity grows, you'll notice your decisions shift, your energy shifts, your standards shift. You stop tolerating the things that once distracted you. You stop engaging in habits that once drained you. You stop accepting behaviors that once kept you small. You rise into a version of yourself who expects more from life because you finally expect more from yourself, and people will notice. But people will notice. They'll feel the difference in your presence, in your confidence, in your clarity. But the most important person who notices is you, because you begin to trust yourself in ways you never did before. You realize you're not defined by your past anymore. You're not defined by who you used to be. You're defined by who you choose to be today, and who you choose to be again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. This consistency builds a momentum that becomes unbreakable. It becomes the foundation for a life you once thought was out of reach. And it all started from a simple daily choice, to honor the highest version of yourself, even when it was easier not to. There's a higher, more powerful, more purposeful version of you waiting. A version that's built through consistency, not occasional effort. And a version that emerges through commitment, not convenience. A version that grows each time you choose strength over fear, clarity over confusion, action over avoidance, purpose over distraction. And the moment you start choosing that version every day, everything in your life begins to change. Ha!